Long Voyage Back, page 302. May the last days find you soon, said Katia, so low that only Lisa could hear. Hey, Oscar asked me to get some pot, said Janice. You go on ahead, I'll join you later. Lisa and Katia walked on. When they emerged several minutes later from the shrub oak onto the beach, they found themselves surrounded by 6 or 7 other young women and girls and one man, all but 2 of them black, all watching a long, powerful motor yacht slowly approaching a large mooring about 40 feet from the shore. The black women were wearing blouses and shorts, both so frayed in some cases they were almost in rags. The hot wind was blowing offshore at this point, and the water, despite the strength of the breeze, was calm. "Excuse me," said Katia to the lone white girl, who was wearing only a bikini bottom, her small naked breasts a light strip in her brown torso. "Can we get something to eat?" The girl frowned. "The boat," she said, pointing. "They bring it on the boat." Lisa could see that 2 men had successfully tied their yacht to a mooring about 50 feet out. "Say, are you girls coming or not?" one of the men yelled from the bow of the yacht. "Bring us the little boat, man," one of the black women shouted back. "Oh no," the man shouted back, grinning. "You can swim out today. The exercise will be good for you." "Put the boarding ladder down," shouted a pudgy black girl, slipping off her brightly coloured but tattered blouse and putting it down neatly next to the other woman's basket. The woman then ran 4 or 5 strides into water, made a clumsy dive and began swimming out to the yacht. "Ah, shit, I can't swim," one of the other black girls said as 2 more prepared to swim out. "Hey!" shouted the white girl to the man standing on the bow, watching the swimmers. "I can't swim! How about a lift?" "Later, sweetheart," the man replied. "We'll let these ladies row in with what they buy." "Oh shit," said the white girl to herself. "By the time we get there, they'll be tough to bargain with." "Who cares," said a black girl. "We'll eat anyway." "Shit, rotten mangoes and fish." "It's food. I eat it." Lisa and Katia stood just behind these 2, watching the 3 women who had swum out to the yacht. One by one they climbed up the boarding ladder onto the starboard side and stepped down into the huge cockpit. The yacht's bow was pointed directly at them, so Lisa couldn't tell what was happening on board. The man who had been on the bow went aft when the women began climbing aboard. 3 of the women still on shore now moved off along the beach and seemed to have lost interest in the yacht, leaving only Lisa, Katia and the black girl, who was desperate for any kind of food. When Lisa looked out again, she saw 2 of the men peering out over the top of the high windshield and examining her and Katia through binoculars. In another few minutes a dinghy appeared from stern, and a black woman climbed down into it and paddled towards shore. The girl in front of Lisa and Katia walked down to the water's edge to meet her. "Fucking white pigs," the returning woman said, throwing the oar up on the beach. She retrieved a small cardboard carton half filled with mangled fish from the bottom of the dinghy and came toward them. "You want food?" she said to Katia as she approached. "Go get it. They told me to tell you they're feeling generous. They like white girls." Lisa began to walk down the beach to the dinghy. As she did, she noticed the men had tied a line to the dinghy's stern, which was attached to the other end of their yacht. Katia had been slow in following, but now she stood beside the dinghy, just as the last black girl had sullenly climbed aboard. "Coming?" she said to Katia gloomily. Lisa looked at Katia. "Who are these men?" Katia asked slowly, as if calculating. "They bring food and stuff every few days," said the black girl. "Is there ever any rough stuff?" Katia asked. "Why do they use rough stuff? Do they have guns?" "I've never seen none. You, June?" "Oh, they got guns," said the woman who'd been on board. "They're pirates, Mon." "Pirates?" Lisa echoed. "My God, that's the mollycoddle," Katia explained suddenly, remembering Neil's presentation the night before. "Sure, they're famous," said the black woman. "You stay here," said Katia to Lisa. "I'm going out to take a look." "Shouldn't we wait for Jim?" Lisa asked. "I'll be all right," said Katia. "The only thing I've got they might want to take can't be permanently removed." She laughed nervously and walked down the beach. After a long hesitation, dove into the water. As Lisa watched Katia's slow progress, the last black girl was having trouble pulling the dinghy into the water. Lisa helped her, and when the boat was afloat, impulsively jumped in beside her. Katia swam past the boarding ladder to examine the yacht's transom, to verify that this indeed was the mollycoddle, so that Lisa and the black girl arrived before her. When they boarded, they were greeted by 2 white men, dressed neatly in blue Bermuda shorts and clean white sports shirts, and immediately offered a lit joint. The older of the 2, a pale white man in his late 30s with sideburns and a baseball cap, paid special attention to Lisa. One of the 2 black girls still aboard was lounging topless on a cushioned chair in the huge open area aft, smoking woozily. She seemed disorientated when the joint was passed to her. When Katia pulled herself up the ladder, her wet t-shirt clinging to her breasts, the other man looked at her with frank interest. "I say, you look better clothed than most women do naked," he said to her. I'm Michael." Katia shook her curly blonde hair and both hands squeezed water out of its length. "Hello," she said coolly, looking carefully around the boat. "We'd like some food." "Why, certainly, darling. What would you like?" Katia accepted the proffered joint as Lisa had done and took a distracted puff. "Whatever you've got," she asked. "Over here," said Michael. "How old are you?" the man with the baseball cap asked Lisa. He was short and thick-set with powerful forearms, and although Michael seemed to have an English accent, this man was an American. 15, said Lisa, feeling self-conscious under his frank appraisal of her figure. "That's nice," the man said. "You been in the commune long?" "No, I'm just visiting." "You'll love it," he said, grinning. "Everybody loves it." When Katia and the black girl looked into some cans and boxes on the other side of the deck, Lisa became aware of a loud male grunting coming from the main cabin forward. A woman's suppressed little half-screams occasionally accompanied the grunting. "Sounds like Robert must be selling the whole stock," Lisa's admirer in the cap joked to her. "I'd like as much of the fruit as you can spare," said Katia. "You can keep the fish." "Why, certainly, darling," Michael said. He was tall, slender and clean-shaven, with hard blue eyes that glittered happily. "How much fruit would you say we can spare, mate?" he asked his short friend. "Quite a bit," said the other. "I think we might be able to part with all the rest, don't you think?" said Michael, not actually paying much attention to the older man. "Certainly. Thank you," said Katia. "May I take the basket too?" "I think that might be arranged," said Michael. "Fine," said Katia, abruptly lifting the straw basket of fruit and striding back toward the boarding ladder. "Let's go, Lisa." Michael grabbed her arm in mid-stride, and as Katia spun sideways, a few oranges spilled forward onto the cockpit floor. Katia remained in a half-crouch, holding the basket clutched to her chest and staring at the fallen oranges, Michael still holding her arm. "Payment, darling," Michael said quietly. "The matter of payment, don't you know?" Katia lowered the basket to the floor and then straightened up. She looked slowly over at Lisa. Now the sounds of the woman's grasping screams, whether of pain or pleasure, Lisa, frightened, couldn't tell, came sharply from the forward cabin. In the silence of the confrontation between Katia and Michael, the screams seemed horrendously loud and obscene. "You've got to pay for them," the sullen black girl said. "It's only fair," said the other black girl drowsily. "Besides, darling," the man named Michael said, seeming to ease his grip on Katia slightly, "these are the last days, remember? Nothing matters. Take joy in all you do." "That's right," said the sullen black girl gloomily. "Of course," said Katia, shaking her head as if clearing it. "I'm new here and just didn't know." She smiled at the man, whose big hand still held her arm, and then she added in a voice so soft and husky and sexy it startled and frightened Lisa, "How do you like it, Michael?" "You name it. I'm good at it." Lisa thought that even Michael looked surprised at the sudden sexual power Katia seemed to be turning on him. "Don't forget me," the older man said nervously. Katia turned to the other man. "I'll take care of you too," she said huskily. The noises from the cabin had ceased. "But what about these other girls?" she added, still in her new husky voice. "Don't they get some food too?" "Certainly," said Michael. "Help yourself, girls. Take the dinghy ashore with your food. It's lovely seeing you again." "Oh no," said the man in the baseball cap. "I got a little girl here who wants to pay too. Right, honey?" "Go, Lisa," said Katia sharply. The older man grasped Lisa firmly by the arm. "Missed the fun?" he said, smiling. With a swiftness that caught everyone by surprise, Katia pulled a sharp mahogany boat hook from its staple near the control panel shelf and whacked the older man a vicious blow on the side of his head, forcing him to release Lisa and stagger away. "Swim!" shouted Katia, turning to swing at Michael, who was approaching her in a crouch. Lisa took 2 steps towards the yacht's combing and glanced back to see Michael duck under the boat hook, tackle Katia and send her sprawling while the third man was coming at her with a pistol. Then Lisa hopped over the combing and into the water. As she surfaced and began swimming for shore, she heard a man shout, and then Katia scream. Lisa slipped once as she staggered out of the water, and seeing 2 men getting into the dinghy to pursue her, broke into a run towards the shrubs. Even as she darted down the trail across the peninsula, she wondered if she would turn back to try to help Katia. It was getting dark, and she decided to get off the main trail and find a place to hide. She tripped once and fell, immediately springing up to run forward. Seeing a small fire in a shack ahead of her, she ran for help. When she appeared in the firelight, an old black man who had been sitting beside the fire leapt up. "Get away!" he shouted. "Go!" Lisa stood frozen, trembling, almost unable to speak. I need help," she finally blurted. "Some men—" "Go away!" the old man shouted, and then turned to look at the shack 10 feet away. A young white man and woman were crawling out of the entrance, their eyes red and watery. "Water," the man called feebly. "Please help us, water." "Get back in there!" the old black man shouted and brandished a heavy stick at the 2 feeble spectres. "Back! Back!" Lisa gasped as she suddenly realised that the 2 were sick, feverish. Glancing back in terror for a sight of her pursuers, she ran on. She hadn't gone more than 40 feet when she came upon the burnt-out remains of another shack, the white bones of 3 skeletons gleaming in the dim light of dusk. Whimpering, she ran on, no longer aware of exactly where she was fleeing, only needing to run, to escape the horrors that seemed to be exploding into her life in an unending series. At dawn the next morning, Jim reported to Neil that Katya and Lisa were missing. Earlier, after he and Oscar had finished re-anchoring Scorpio, they began looking for the 3 women, but only found Janice. They traced Katya and Lisa to the beach where the bartering boat had been moored, and then nothing. A black girl on the beach told Jim that the men on the mollycoddle had motored off with the sexy white girl, but she thought the younger white girl must have escaped. Although Janice and Oscar had abandoned the search when it got dark and returned to Scorpio, Jim had kept looking another 4 hours, finally stealing a bicycle to ride the 10 miles back to Charlotte Emile, and then swum out to Vagabond. For Neil and Frank and Jean, it was clear that now they had to raid the mollycoddle, and probably the estate too. Katya, if she was still alive, was probably either on the boat or out at the pirates' estate. Lisa had either shared Katya's fate or had escaped and was already back on Scorpio, making her way back to Vagabond. Neil suspected Lisa would try to find Jim if anything untoward had happened, and thus would have tried to make her way back to Scorpio. Through binoculars they soon determined that the mollycoddle was moored at a berth at the docks, but that the Scorpio hadn't returned yet. They guessed that Oscar was too timid and inexperienced a sailor to try to sail the 10 miles back to Charlotte Emile Harbour in the dark. Neil ordered Jim and Tony to go back to Salt Point and contact Scorpio, hopefully to find Lisa there. In any case, they were to help sail Scorpio back to join Vagabond in Charlotte Emile. After Katya and Lisa were both safe, God willing, and additional food and weapons were gathered from the raid, the 2 boats would set off to sail together for the southern waters. Jean's concern over the disappearance of Lisa was mostly assuaged by Jim and Tony's departure to search for her, and Neil next signalled the Wellingtons with the air horn to begin the final plans for trying to save Katya and Lisa, and, once again, themselves. 8 hours later, Jean walked slowly along the dock, holding a white-brimmed straw hat on her head with one hand to prevent it being blown off by the wind. Ahead of her and to the left was Mollycoddle, tossing in the rough seas that were rolled in by the storm, its stern facing her, the wind blowing it a few feet off the dock, its mooring lights taut. She was wearing a black bikini top and a blue denim skirt, the skirt necessary to hide the small automatic strapped to the inside of her right thigh. The brief bikini top was to guarantee a friendly reception by Mollycoddle's guardians. Neil's last stern-faced words to her after he had helped to strap the gun to her thigh were, "Don't let anyone feel you up." At this moment he was, Jean hoped, in Vagabond's dinghy, hiding 6 boats back. Philip was casually fishing from the dock a dozen yards behind her. Ollie and Conrad Macklin with binoculars were seated in the park area, admiring the boats. Neil had asked Frank to remain on board Vagabond, telling him that if Neil himself were killed, Frank had to be safe to take over leadership. He was to join them only after they succeeded. As she neared the stern of the pirate yacht, she saw no sign of life. Neil said they were certain that there was at least 1 man aboard, and Philip thought there were 2, but whoever was aboard was below. Perhaps the hot wind from the distant hurricane had discouraged them, or worse, perhaps Katya was there with them and Lisa. Timing things carefully, she waited until she was exactly opposite the open cockpit of Mollycoddle, and then released a hold on the hat. It went flying off towards the yacht. Jean uttered a little scream. The hat sailed into the cockpit as planned, and then bounced on a seat cushion and flew out over the other side. No, hit a metal strut and dropped back into the cockpit. She stared at it wide-eyed. In theory, a guard was supposed to come out, rescue the hat, engage her in conversation, ask her aboard. Nothing happened. Glancing up and down the dock and trying to look upset and pathetic, Jean walked over to the edge of the dock and contemplated either hailing Mollycoddle or going aboard after her hat. "Ahoy there!" she said in a helplessly feminine voice as she could muster, the rushing of the wind in the rigging of nearby sailboats effectively drowning her voice. No one responded. There were 4 feet of open water between the dock and the coaming of Mollycoddle, an easy jump for Jean if only the gun didn't work loose. Steadying herself in the cockpit, she gauged the distance carefully. She leapt into the yacht's cockpit, letting herself fall forward with a crash onto her left side, screaming a good loud scream and lying there contorted and moaning. In a few seconds the cabin door opened, and a large bare-chested man holding a pistol appeared, stared at fearlessly, and then looking along the dock. "What the hell are you doing here?" he said in a distinctly American accent. "My hat," said Jean, grimacing in pretend pain and pulling down her skirt and adjusting her legs so that her ornament wouldn't show. Then sitting up she gestured at the straw hat lying on the other side of the cockpit. "And you jumped after it, huh?" the big man said, now grinning, his handlebar moustache flickering up at the ends. Jean nodded. Rubbing her left ankle, she decided she had twisted, but not badly. She didn't want to be carried. Need some help? He asked, stuffing his pistol in between his belly and shorts. No, I'm fine, she said, holding up a hand to restrain him. I'm just a little bit in shock, I guess. She looked up at him and smiled wanly. He stared at her breasts. You want a drink or something? He asked. Oh no, I don't want to bother you, Jean said, standing awkwardly. Although come to think of it, a drink would be nice. Hey Mike, can the lady have a drink? The big man asked, and Jean saw a tall, slender man wearing a neat beige sports shirt and shorts standing in the cabin doorway. He was eyeing her coldly. She smiled at him. He smiled back. Certainly, Bart, he said. We wouldn't want her to leave in pain. She might sue us. Jean laughed prettily. Come in, darling. Said the spider to the fly, said Jean as she limped past Bart and Michael into the luxurious main saloon of the Hatteras. There was no one else there. Wow, this is something, Jean said as she paused in the middle of the plush carpet and looked around, still hoping, half fearing, to discover signs of Lisa's presence. Would you like a drink? Said Michael. Please sit down. Thank you, said Jean, sitting down in a leather chair and quickly crossing her legs. Gin and tonic? He laughed. How about some rum? He asked. That's fine too. Bart? Sure, Mike, said Bart, and went forward into the far part of the galley. I'm Michael Forrester, said Michael. I'm Jeannie Wilkins, she said after an awkward hesitation. And what brings you tumbling into the mollycoddle? Stupidity, I guess. My hat blew onto your boat. A likely story, said Michael. Are you sure it wasn't because you noticed my handsome face in the street and followed me here out of uncontrollable lust? Jean smiled, again awkwardly. If I'd seen you before, I might have, she managed, smiling more broadly. Are you often overcome with uncontrollable lust? Jean felt a bit overwhelmed. At the rate this conversation was going, Michael would have her in the sack before Neil had paddled halfway here. Only on hot, stifling days when there's no wind, she answered. Ah, said Michael. What disappointing weather then, no? Bart entered with the drinks, handed them around, and kept a bottle of beer for himself. He sat down on the second easy chair in the saloon. Cheers, said Michael. Anyone aboard? A loud voice came from outside. Who is it, Bart? Said Michael, frowning. Jean tensed. This was the proverbial it. She uncrossed her legs and straightened in a chair. She wished she'd practised drawing the gun. Bart arose, put his beer down, adjusted the gun in his belt, walked up the 2 steps into the cockpit and looked to his left. What is it? She heard him say to Philip. Have you a gaff I can borrow? You seem nervous, Jean, she heard Michael say, and saw him staring at her with a suspicious frown. What's the matter? That man's voice, she said uncertainly. Yes, what about it? The yacht lurched as if a sudden new weight had been added. Michael and Jean both saw Bart standing in the centre of the cockpit, but facing away from the door now, with his arms raised. Don't shoot, buddy, Bart said loudly. Michael leapt up, rushed past Jean and opened a drawer from which he drew a pistol. He then crouched behind a chair facing the main cabin entrance. Jean was stunned by such a piece of bad luck. Michael had chosen the one place where he would inevitably see her if she tried to draw her gun. Neil and Philip appeared in the cockpit, Neil nudging Bart, who with arms raised and empty-handed was coming down into the cabin. He's got a gun on me, Mike, Bart said when he saw Michael's pistol trained in them. All right, lady, said Neil. Get into the galley with your hands behind your head. You move, lady, hissed Michael, and I'll kill you. Go ahead and kill her, Neil said evenly. She's none of my business. Move, lady! Slowly Jean stood up and, appalled and terrified, walked slowly towards the galley area. What do you want? Michael asked tensely. All we want, began Neil. Don't turn around, interrupted a voice from behind Neil and Philip. Throw your guns on the rug. Someone Jean couldn't see came into the cockpit behind Philip and Neil and had a gun on them. Neil, after a brief hesitation, threw his gun on the rug between Bart and Michael. Philip threw Bart's gun and his automatic after it, and Jean reached down, lifted her skirt, and, hand trembling, pulled out the loaded .38 automatic. She remembered to press the safety as Neil had instructed her to, and held the weapon in front of her, hidden by the counter that separated the main part of the galley from the saloon. Bart picked up their guns, and Michael stood up behind the leather chair. A third man, black, pistol in hand, appeared in the cabin entrance behind Philip and Neil. Who in the bloody hell are you two? Michael hissed angrily. He thrust his pistol violently into his belt and crossed to the couch to retrieve his barely touched glass of rum. He glared at Jean, not really seeing her. Neil didn't reply. The black man behind Neil and Jim spoke. Okay, Mon, you get over there, against that wall there. Bart, you search him. Neil and Philip slowly walked over to the wall on the other side of the main saloon. Bart dropped Philip's gun onto the couch behind Michael and ambled over to Neil and Philip. Michael and the black man both took their eyes off Jean to watch what was about to happen. She froze. As soon as she spoke and showed her gun, they'd turn and shoot her, 3-1, and then Neil and Philip. She was unable to raise their gun. "They're clean," Bart announced after his search. Michael turned to Jean. "Perhaps you'd better check the lady too," he said. Jean stared at him, wide-eyed with fear. As Bart came forward to her, she reacted instinctively. She crouched and raised her gun to her eye level, aiming it directly at the black man whose pistol was still pointing at Neil. "Drop it!" she snapped, so sharply it astonished her. Her eyes were wide and hysterical. Only her head and gun barrel were visible above the galley shelf. Bart stopped, and all of them watched her, motionless and uncertain. Then the black man swung his pistol at her and fired, and Jean pulled the trigger, the gun jumping in her hand, 2 shots following one after the other in less than half a second. Neil leapt on the man who had shot at her, ripping the gun from his hand, and Jean shifted her aim to Michael, who was standing only 8 feet away, his hand frozen on the butt of the gun in his belt. "Don't shoot!" he screamed. Neil took Bart's weapon and stood behind her with 2 guns, one in each hand. The man who had shot at her had been hit and was sitting on the floor, clutching his shoulder and looking at Jean with both surprise and pain, as if she had committed a social faux pas by shooting at him. Philip began retrieving the weapons on the couch and rug. He slowly turned to look at the wounded black man, now slumped against the chair, at the bewildered look on Bart's face, at Philip now complacently pointing a .45 straight at him, and finally at Neil, who was smiling tensely. Finally, slowly, Michael looked back at Jean. He stared at her with slow hatred. "You bloody bitch," he said quietly. "Are the boobs fake too?" "Afraid that information is classified," Neil answered, coming up behind Michael to remove the gun from his belt.